Hi everyone, I'm Monique Fenech from Australasian Supply Chain Institute. If you can hear me, please raise your hand. Thanks so much. Great. Well, I'm really excited to share today's keynote speaker with you, John Chase, Director of SOP Plan. John Chase is our facilitator for the Fresh Connection. And at ASCI, we're very excited to be the Australian partner for the Fresh Connection, meaning that we can offer the challenge to our members for the very best price and compete against the rest of the world as our Australian teams. Hugely exciting, and we're going to hear all about how you can get involved in today's session, Introduction to the Fresh Connection. So John is a veteran business advisor, consultant and manager with over 30 years of experience in helping businesses to formulate business strategies and to improve their supply chain and manufacturing performance. And he's worked in New Zealand, he's based in New Zealand, but he's also worked in Australia, South Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. John has been facilitating the Fresh Connection since 2017. And in 2018, he led the team that won the facilitators pool in the Global Challenge. Not sure what that involved, but I think we're about to hear all about it. So over to you. Welcome, John, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Monique, and thanks to everybody who's joined this afternoon. We appreciate your time is precious, and certainly do our very best to make good use of the time that you've allowed us. A little bit of the, come on, little machine. Oh, that's all we need is computers to decide they're going to misbehave. So a little bit about myself, John Chase. You've probably picked from the accent already that I was born and raised in South Africa, but have been resident in New Zealand for a long time, although I've been back to South Africa for a few years in between as well. Trained as an engineer, chemical engineer, and spent my early career in the food and dairy industry, working with a company that, if you're in that industry, you may know, APV Baker. And then in about 1987, I decided that having a real job was really quite hard, so I went off the rails and went into consulting. And since then, I've spent a lot of my career with firms like Ernst & Young, where I was a director in their supply chain practice in South Africa, KPMG that became Bearing Point in New Zealand, one of the founders of a mid-sized consulting firm here called Intent that's still going, and then eventually went out on my own and set up my own little business, Soplan. And as you'd pick from the name, an awful lot of what I enjoy doing is around sales and operations planning. In between times, I've also spent a number of years back in line management roles for companies like Siemens in New Zealand, Fletcher Building, and Timberlink, which is actually an Australian company, but with operations here in New Zealand. So as you'll pick from that, I've done a lot of things, dotted through all of that career, a fair amount of training, but it's never been something I've done all day, every day. So I would certainly ask you to forgive the fact that my presentation may not always be as slick as a full-time professional trainer. Hopefully make up with some experience and added value in other areas. Certainly in the work that I've done over the years, I had always seen a lot of value in simulations and letting people get their hands on to experience the stuff that we were talking about. And certainly was a big user of the beer game for a long time. And then back in 2017, I was lucky enough to stumble across the Fresh Connection and have been involved in facilitating, leading the Fresh Connection since then. As Monique says, I was part of, or led the team that won, it was actually in 2019, which is effectively the equivalent of the Global Challenge that the ASCI teams will be participating in. And it's simply a side group that is run by the facilitators around the world. Part of retaining your accreditation to deliver the Fresh Connection is actually to participate in that challenge each year. So certainly something I've enjoyed. Let's take a little bit of a sidestep at the moment and talk about something that I promise is relevant. In your reading, and you've probably come across in recent years, a lot of talk of chaotic systems, things like the term that's often used is the butterfly effect. The idea behind all of this, of course, is that our world is governed very strongly by physical laws that are always absolutely predictable. We know that we will always follow those physical laws. But when you put them together in a complex system, sometimes the outcomes are not quite what we expect or are difficult to predict. That little quote at the bottom is from the movie, The Jurassic Park. You can have a butterfly flap its wings in Peking, and in Central Park, you get rain instead of sunshine. So some of those ideas that are in that are really very key to what we talk about in the Fresh Connection. That idea of connectedness, the fact that everything that we touch in one area of a business or in our world affects things far and wide. And secondly, the idea that the magnitude of the outcomes are not always in proportion to the magnitude of the inputs. Sometimes a small change, a small tweak in one area can deliver a huge impact in another area in the end result. Sometimes we talk about leverage, and we can use that either to our benefit or to our detriment. And both of those things are true in life in general, but also very, very relevant to the Fresh Connection. If we take that back into business speak, I guess we often talk about the silos in business. So we talk about different departments that sometimes work better with each other than at other times. And often when we talk about alignment, that's where our brains go immediately to think about the way different parts of the business work together. But equally important is the top to bottom alignment. The idea that we can set a business strategy that we're going to focus and win in an area or a different area. Very important to get the operations of the business well aligned with that strategy, or we're going to be doomed to failure. And finally, there's the idea that this connectedness in our supply chain extends quite far beyond our own business's walls to suppliers and customers, and even further backwards and forwards than that. These are all pretty key concepts that are covered very strongly and I guess form the very heart of the Fresh Connection. And if we ask about what are the key learnings out of working through the Fresh Connection, that's probably what it's about. Connectedness, the fact that what we do in one part of a business has a very strong impact everywhere else. Does any of this ring a bell? Do we often find that sales, being involved and working with customers all the time, understand really well what customers want and what we need to offer to the marketplace to succeed, and sometimes make promises beyond what we're able to comfortably deliver because we have that understanding of what the market demands. Quite often we find that there are two views of inventory in a business. Finance have the right view almost by definition, because we know exactly what the value is of the materials that we're holding at any given time. Supply chain probably also have a pretty good idea of what's there, but the one thing we can be sure of is that at any given time we're going to find we've got too much of some things and too little of others, all at the same time. So really common to say we've got too much stock overall, but too little of the stuff that we really need. We also obviously have a very real set of constraints on our operations, where we can't always turn on a dime with no notice. So we may well have limitations on how easily we can respond to and fulfill those promises that sales have delivered into the marketplace. Procurement. Obviously, very often we measure procurement on the component price instead of looking at the total cost of ownership. I had some very real experience with that in South Africa, working with a mining company who ran operations in close to a residential area, ran pipes through that area, steel pipes carrying slurry under pressure. Procurement got a great deal on replacement pipes, which saved an awful lot of money until they actually ruptured, destroyed somebody's house, and put half of the plant out of operation for 3 months. So understanding the overall impact of our decisions is really pretty key. And finally, that idea around KPIs aligned with the overall business importance and the overall business strategy. Almost instinctively, what we tend to do is we decide we're going to measure finance on cost, we're going to measure operations on cost and possibly DIFOT, sales on sales volume and margin, without necessarily understanding that we may well need to compromise in some areas to win overall. Very often that's what we wind up with. Tension, sometimes it's as real as that, with real headbutting between departments. But very often it's more subtle than that, but no less real, where we may well get white anting, as it's quite often called, but people working against each other and the overall business interests because we measure differently. This all has a really big impact on the business. Productivity, obviously, if we're working on the wrong things, if we're not communicating well as to what we need to do, productivity is going to fail. And in these days of high labor costs and skills shortages, that's something that nobody can afford to live with. And secondly, employee engagement. I think we all come to work, we want to do a good job, we want to enjoy our jobs. And we all know when the things that we're doing are actually simply inefficient or a waste of time. And that hurts all of our morale. And so a very big part of getting good, clean alignment helps to let everybody feel that they're contributing to the overall business and helping it to succeed and making a real difference to themselves. I think you'll find that when HR people talk about the greatest advantages in retaining people, it's letting people feel that they make a difference to the business. And obviously all of this impacts on profits. And that's both the revenue side of the equation, so bringing in the sales and the profits, and also obviously the costs. My guess is I probably haven't told you anything yet that you didn't really know absolutely well before I said it. What benefit, what does the Fresh Connection bring to the table? One example that we often use is learning or using simulations like the Fresh Connection is almost like learning to ride a bike. We can learn it by theory. A good bike designer probably needs to know that a rider balances by using the centrifugal force in their steering and the way that they manage the bike to counteract the gravitational force. Now, often we talk about bike riding as a skill that you can learn when you're a child, but still retain, and you can still ride a bike very much later in life. If that's how you learned it, that it's about generating centrifugal force to counteract gravitational force, that probably wouldn't be quite so true. Why do we learn and why do we retain that skill? It's because we learned it like this. We learned it by practicing, by doing, by bumping our knees, by making mistakes, but really getting involved and really feeling what it was like, learning by our mistakes.
Hi, Lainey.
And,
Good, yourself?
and that, Monica, I'm not sure, we seem to be getting somebody back in. But that's a really big part of what the Fresh Connection is all about. It's giving you the experience to try things, to really make decisions and see the outcomes in a relatively short time frame, and without the huge costs that go without making big mistakes back in the real world. So what does the Fresh Connection look like? It's an online simulation. So what we've got here is a picture of the homepage. So what you see when you log in as part of interacting with the simulation. It's a cross-functional simulation, so everybody sees the same homepage, but different members of the team will get focused information based on their role as they drill further down beyond this front view. So the challenge, the business, it's based on a business which is a producer of fruit juices, which is based in the Netherlands, which does mean that whenever we talk about financial numbers, they're euros rather than dollars, but we do get used to that pretty quickly. The scenario is that this business has suffered from poor performance in recent years. Generally, when you start in the first round of the simulation, you'll find that the business is making a loss at the time that you start. The scenario again is that you're a management team of 4 people that have been appointed to turn this business around. You do it by making strategic and tactical decisions. So you're asked to enter a whole series of decisions around how the business is going to be structured and what your policies are going to be around supply chain, procurement, sales, and so forth. Those decisions are then put into action for 6 months, and you get the result at the end of that. So purchasing control, the sourcing of raw materials, and we go through the materials that they buy. Just now, supply chain control, the inventory management parts of the whole process. Operations are responsible for actually running the machinery and producing the end product. And sales, of course, are dealing with the customers and making promises that hopefully we can deliver back in the rest of the business. The team's assignment is to make the company profitable, and as profitable as you can by making those strategic choices. There is one indicator which decides whether you win or lose, and that's around return on investment. Sorry, got one step ahead of myself. This is a picture of the overall supply chain of the Fresh Connection. So you'll see right in the center of that, the business makes products, juice products based on orange juice largely. It's a 2-stage manufacturing business. So we mix the ingredients together in mixing equipment. We then put it into bottles. We buy a range of ingredients, and these can vary a little depending on how it's set up. But they're always, a large one is orange, which as an orange juice manufacturer, you can imagine it's the core of our costs. It's a big, high volume and expensive ingredient. Mango, which is a little bit smaller than that, but still important. Vitamin C, which is really low volume, but has high unit cost. Packs, which are the cartons that the product goes into. Those are the cardboard packs. And then PET bottles, which are actually plastic bottles, which, as you can imagine with plastic bottles, have a really big volume per unit of production and per unit of cost. So, of course, they take up a lot of space in transport and your warehouse. We warehouse all of those. So we've got an inbound store, And like a lot of businesses, if we have more than we can hold in the store, we can ship it out to offsite storage or an overflow warehouse, but that does come at a cost. We go through our production process, and then of course we hold outbound materials, so the various products that we produce. Again, we have a warehouse, but if necessary, we can shoot that off to offsite storage at a price. We deal with often 3 or 4 customers, depending on the setup. And again, each of those customers has their own priorities. Normally, we've got one big high volume customer that takes a big part of our production, but probably is quite sensitive. Then there's a mid-range customer who probably pays slightly higher margins, and somebody that's a little bit more specialist. In this case, it's a chain of petrol stations who really only use the PET bottles because that's what you tend to buy in a petrol station. So each of our customers has their own priorities, and we negotiate separately with each of those, and the decisions that we make have an impact back into the business. The evaluation of performance, the Fresh Connection provides a tremendous number of indicators and reports to tell you how you're doing, but ultimately there's one measure that decides how well you do in this business, and that's about return on investment. And that's driven obviously by revenue, and there we can control both, or we can influence both the price. And in this case, unfortunately, we can't just ratchet the price up or down uniquely. It's to achieve a higher price, we actually have to offer customers higher levels of service or better product. So yes, we can achieve higher prices, but we have to perform well internally to do that. We can also control volume by the portfolio of products we choose to sell to different customers. In terms of costs, we can control the operational costs. So those are yields of products, they're actual running costs of the equipment, and very largely labor as well. And we have the opportunity of putting in place improvement projects, either internally or with suppliers. Excuse me. And all of those, of course, have positive benefits, but also cost something to put in place. The investment part of the return on investment equation, of course, comes from the equipment, the machinery that we use, but also the inventory that we hold and the payment terms that we offer to customers. So in some cases, we can negotiate a higher price with the customer, but the cost of that is our payment terms may extend out. So we're making a series of trade-off decisions that impact on all of those 3 key items, and the intention is to achieve the best overall result in terms of return on investment. So some of the key topics, the key areas where we would expect to learn in the Fresh Connection, it always includes an element around supply chain strategy. That whole idea of setting a strategy, deciding what our focus is as a business, how we're planning to win in the market, and then making sure that we're developing and designing our operations to support that strategy. There's not only one way to do well in the Fresh Connection. You can actually choose any of a number of different strategies, and as long as we line up the rest of the business to support that, you can achieve a really good result in any one of a number of different ways. Second area, which is always going to be important, is sales and operations planning, S&OP, and that's really at the heart of it, both in terms of coordinating the activity of the team members right into the parameters that go into the planning systems. Risk management is key, and of course we have variability in the supply side of things and in the production side, and managing and mitigating risk is a big factor that we work through all the time. Trade-offs are at the heart of it. For every benefit, there's a cost. And the fresh connection is really about achieving that best balance of costs and benefits. And a number of people have said to me that possibly the biggest learning for them was around good use of data and of key performance indicators. I think the fresh connection provides quite a good model for performance reports and for indicators that are actually quite well applicable in businesses at large. But certainly your key driver for all of this is the data that we get through those various reports. The system can be set up to address various advanced topics, hybrid strategies where we may look to run almost two parallel strategies through the same business. In some cases, we get control over the supply chain footprint by having external distribution centers. We can focus on the carbon footprint, and in that case, things like the distance that raw materials gets transported will have an influence on our result. And multi-channel, so in some cases, rather than purely selling through distributors, we may sell some ourselves through an online channel. That's all of the, I guess, the hardcore supply chain left brain stuff, if you like. But the other area where there is always learning is around the team and leadership and engagement and communication, how we get four people as the team members working effectively together, making decisions that actually work as a whole, alignment, consistency, cooperation, and that great big benefit of being able to experiment, try things, maybe be a little bit more bold than we might be able to back in the real world. So a great learning opportunity, both on the soft side and the hard side of the business. Let's do a bit of a tour through the fresh connection. And what I've done is pulled up a simulation that is exactly what you would see if you're participating in the simulation. This would be either the regional challenge that we're running or the global finals. And what you'll see, this is the My Company view, I guess the home page.
So John, could you share your screen again? Because we're still seeing the PowerPoint page.
Okay, my apologies.
That's okay. You'll just have to share your screen again.
I share it again. Okay, stop sharing and now share.
That's it. I'll tell you when I can see. That's it. Thank you.
Working? Good.
Yes, that's right.
Right, apologies. So that's the screen that you would see as a participant in any of the roles. And almost inevitably, when you come in, the first area that you're going to look at is the inbox. One of the important ways that the organization communicates with you, the priorities, the changes, the things that you need to think about is through emails. And I guess just like the real world in that way. So what you'll typically get is a series of emails that will tell you about priorities, things that have happened, things that you need to focus on. And that's really the key starting point for almost any interaction with the business. As you'll see right now, there are a great number of emails in my inbox. Don't be put off by that. The reason that there are so many is simply that, as you'll see in the top, at this stage, I'm set up as all 4 team members. I'm purchasing, operations, supply chain, and sales, which means I'm getting everybody's emails. In fact, quite a few of this would only go to one or other of the participants, one or other of the roles. But an example of the sort of thing that you might see is that we're now making people aware of dual sourcing. So we're telling people that actually we can get raw materials from more than one supplier at a cost and a set of rules. So that basically all of the input that we get as participants comes through emails. The second tab along the top is essentially your bill of materials. So this is the technical detail around raw materials and products, the sort of stuff that you really need and you use often. So it's made relatively easily available to you. The Info Center provides all of the other information that you need about the business and the rules and the definitions. So what we find is for each item that we'll use, or each little information bubble that you get through the whole simulation, you'll get some more information here as to what it means or what it's about. And as you progress, you'll probably focus more and more on this tab, which at the moment is empty because we haven't started yet. But this is the rankings, and it tells you how you're doing in comparison with the others that are involved at the same time. Now, each of the role members, each of the 4, has their own screen, and the information on each screen differs depending on what your role is. But the overall layout is very much the same. So what we're seeing in this corner is the key performance indicators that are relative to your role. Now, everybody is interested in return on investment, so everybody gets that as an indicator because that's what we're striving to maximize. But in this case, because we're looking at purchasing, we're interested in things like the percentage of raw material components that have been rejected, raw material costs, the delivery reliability of our suppliers. So each of our 4 roles will have a different set of key performance indicators. And then underneath that, we'll have a series of reports that will give us a whole lot more information about what's been going on. So these are all about the last round, the last 6 months of operation. And in this case, we're looking at the supplier report. And what we're looking at is each of the 4 suppliers. We're getting data on delivery reliability, rejection rates, number of orders. So great deal of information and sliced and diced different ways. In this case, we've got a supplier report and a component report. Right at the moment, those 2 are very similar because each supplier only supplies 1 component, and we only have 1 supplier for each. But at later times, that may well differ, and we may get more than 1 supplier for 1 component. We always have a finance report, and we'll go back to that in a few minutes. But on the right-hand side, we have the decisions. And each role will make a different set of decisions. In this case, for purchasing, it's all about choosing who your suppliers are going to be for each of your raw materials and what the particulars are of the relationship that we're going to negotiate with them. So, for example, we might decide that we're going to negotiate with this supplier, which is packaging materials. And when we decide we're going to negotiate with them, the things that we're negotiating are all pretty familiar. I would guess they're around payment terms, the trade unit that we're receiving goods on, reliabilities, delivery windows. We might be planning to do a supplier development program with them or vendor managed inventory. And as you'll see, the impact of all of these will have an impact on cost. When we start off, we've actually got a cost index of 0.9940. So in other words, there's an industry list price, if you like, for the packaging materials that these guys supply. These guys are actually a slightly discount supplier, so they only charge 99.4% of list price to us. But let's say we wanted to change our payment terms from 4 weeks to, let's say, 8. Instead of 99.4% of list price, they're probably then going to ask us for just over list price, slightly higher. So we can get concessions, but we actually have to pay more if we're asking for a higher level of service from our customers. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of detail in what we're dealing with them. Operations is looking at the machinery and the process crewing and so forth. So what we've got in their key performance dashboard is things like utilization of the warehouses, production plan adherence, and we've got reports that give us good information on performance of the two production lines, mixing and bottling, run times, changeovers, breakdowns, and so forth. And obviously, we've got the opportunity to do a number of things around crewing and planning that will have an impact on those performance areas. The operations people actually often have an opportunity to choose different machinery, and obviously higher performing machinery usually costs more than lower performing. So there's a number of options and trade-offs that we're making there. Supply chain management are making a lot of decisions around run lengths, stocking policies, and so forth. So again, fairly influential. Shorter run lengths are obviously very beneficial in delivering higher performance and lower stocks, but have a cost. Finally, we get to sales, who are negotiating our deals with customers. And it's very, very similar again to what we talked about with procurement, where we can talk about the various things that we might offer to customers. So the service level, the shelf life, the deadline for getting orders in the trade units and so forth. And again, by offering, let's say we went from saying you get 70% of the shelf life, Mr. Customer, to getting 75% of the shelf life, instead of getting just over the standard price, we would probably get quite a lot. So we're now getting about 4% above the standard. So obviously all of those things come at a cost, but they help to improve our revenue if we do them well. The key report that determines the end result of all of this is the finance report. And as you see, the objective in all of this is to return the highest possible return on investment. So in this case, we've started with a 0.54% return on investment, which is better than we normally do. That comes from operating profit divided by investment. Operating profit comes from revenue, and revenue comes from the contract prices that we've negotiated with customers, which you see in front of you. But as we saw before, in return for higher prices, quite often what we've done is we've negotiated a higher level of service, which is all good as long as we actually deliver it, pardon me. But actually, if we fail to deliver it, we wind up paying penalties. And that's exactly what you see we've done here, where we've made promises to customers that we've not kept. And as a result, we've actually wound up losing or paying them a penalty of 21,000 euros. Certainly one of the big no-nos. Our costs come from cost of goods sold, which is about purchase value of the materials. And obviously there it's driven by price, but also utilization and yield. So if we're doing very short runs, we're going to waste material. We're going to spend more money on it, on raw materials, but we'll get benefits, of course. And then we've got a string of overhead costs, which are to do with energy, water, stocking costs. So there's an awful lot of data, as you can see, and we can control almost everything or we can influence almost everything that's on this profit and loss. If we get down to the investment side of it, as you see, there's a few areas there where we've got fixed investment, which is the land, the buildings, things that we don't really have a lot of influence over. But there are the areas of stock where we certainly control very strongly. the machines that we choose to buy, and the payment terms that we offer to customers and suppliers obviously have an impact. And the end result is our overall investment level is obviously the denominator of our return on investment equation. This is the ultimate score of whether we did well or we did badly, 0.54%. Generally speaking, the possible benefit that you can get, the possible returns that you can get, depend very much on setup. But very often people get around 20, 25%. The year that we won, we got 49, but we certainly put a lot of work into actually achieving that. So the message, I guess, is that there's an awful lot of information, there's an awful lot of detail, and it is amazingly close as a simulation to running a real business. And that's really been the aim of the designers, is to make sure that we are coming as absolutely close as we can to a real life business simulation. Excuse me. So if we talk a little bit more about the the fresh connection and where it's come from, the track record. The red countries are places around the world where it's been run. And as you can see, it's an awful lot. It's very, very common. If you Google the...
could you share your other screen again, please?
Sorry,
It's a technical thing, I know, but we really want to see the countries. Thank you.
Yep. Better?
Perfect.
Good. Right, so as you see, the number of countries around the world where it's been used, it's certainly all of the big industrialized ones, and very widely used. In fact, I can see as we look at it, there are a few missing, because a few of the people that I work with in the Global Challenge are actually not colored in, but certainly very widely used. And if you Google the Fresh Connection, you will find a great number of different pages and people talking about it. One of those that you'll find pretty quickly is how to win the Fresh Connection. Don't pay too much attention to that, because bear in mind that was written by somebody who's done it once and probably did quite well. But bear in mind that there are any number of different setups to the Fresh Connection. So what worked for them may not work for another setup. And I guess you lose the real value of it. To get the greatest value, what we want to do is treat it as a real world experience. We're driving a real company. There's not only one way of doing it. We have control, we have decisions to make, and we can win more than one way. So let's go. Yeah, so about 40 partners operating in 40 countries around the world. Since 2008, more than 5,000 professionals. This is the slide is a little bit probably a year old, so that number is probably quite a bit bigger than it is now, than that right now, and used in small and large companies around the world, and I think very, very well regarded. So certainly a well proven and well regarded simulation. Some of the companies that have participated around the world, a lot of the big ones. I think you'll find pretty much every big company you'll find has used it one place or another around the world. Let's talk about the Global Challenge. So that's what's coming up in the next few months. And it works in two stages. Each of the business partners runs a regional challenge. So in this case, the ASCI Regional Challenge is being run in August. That's done over 3 rounds. I will facilitate that. I will help you through those rounds. And what we'll do is that the top 2 teams from that regional challenge get to participate in the Global Professional Final, which this year is an online event, and it'll be held in November. And so there you'll be competing against the other winners from other regions around the world. The ultimate winning team wins an executive education course in supply chain management at MIT. So quite a nice prize to win. There's a theme to each year's global challenge. And in this year, I think quite appropriately, given circumstances in the world, the theme is resilience. So it's a little bit of a hint of things that you might want to think about when you're making your decisions, but obviously they don't give the whole game away in that. Those smiling people that you see in the center of the picture are from the last time that it was run, that the finals were run at an in-person event, which was in Athens a couple of years ago, which is also the one that I attended. So why should you participate? And I've nicked this straight off of the InChange website, because I think it really explains it quite well, the benefits that you'd get from participating in this. It's about experiencing, and that's a real hands-on experience. Remember to talk about learning to ride a bicycle by doing it, experiencing alignment, increasing the awareness across functions. So my suggestion always would be, if you're going to draw a team of people from your business, you're probably going to get the greatest value if you get a number of people drawn from different parts of the business working together. That's certainly where I've seen people have real aha moments. And it also helps getting people talking a common language. So great benefit there from working together. Helps with advanced decision-making skills. It certainly puts a lot of rigor into the decisions that you make, and you get feedback pretty quickly if you get them wrong. It raises your awareness of trade-offs, and those are real in the real world and in the Fresh Connection. Makes you very, very conscious of them, which I think is a real benefit in the work we do day to day. Learning how to put strategy in action. Again, that idea of integrating operations with strategy, seeing the benefits of collaboration, learning about assumptions, the rules of thumb that we apply inherently, to challenge those, building teams, and then the bottom few are about recognition, about being rewarded, actually seeing the benefits of making good decisions, networking, and ultimately, for one team, becoming the world champions. So great exercise. I would certainly recommend it to you, and hand over to Monique to facilitate the questions and answers if you have any that you would like to share.
Thank you so much, John. That was a great presentation, and we're really excited to be running your regional round in August through ASCI, and I've just popped in the chat box the link to the registration page on our ASCI website. And of course, that is for teams of 4, or if you're an individual and you don't want to go through it as a team, ASCI is willing to put you with 3 others who are also individuals wanting to take part. So don't think just because you haven't got a team, you can't compete. But there are some people, John, while we're waiting for questions in the Q&A box, there are some people who can't compete. So can you talk to that quickly so that we cancel out anybody who might pay and then find out that they're not eligible?
I'm not sure exactly who that would be.
Well, they're
some
university students. Yeah.
So certainly the students, there is a separate student challenge which you can participate in. And I think if there's interest in that, we can certainly examine that further.
Yeah, thank you. I also have a question while we're waiting for some others around the time that you think it might take these 4 people each round to adequately submit to the Fresh Connection.
Yeah, good question. And, time is short for everybody. I guess the ultimate answer has to be the more time you put in, the more you get out. and there's almost no limit to that. But if you put it into context, we often run the sort of 3-round process as we're doing with the regional challenge. We often run that in a day. And the way that we do that is we do a bit of an introduction to each of the 3 rounds, and then we give you something like an hour and 3/4 or 2 hours to work together as a team and to make and to input your decisions in at the end of that, say, 2 hours. So it's doable if you decide that you're going to allocate 2 hours apart from the webinars to the process. If you have more, you will benefit from putting more than that in, but I think you probably wouldn't want to put less than that in. Having said that, we've put aside 2 hours for each of the webinars, and I would see that at least some of that is the start of that working together. So you would actually spend a little bit of that time in the webinar as well. And then we would be comparing notes at the end of that to help you along the way.
I'm just mentioning to one of the attendees, there's a really good question. So the link that I've just put in, John, to the registration for your 3-round course is actually full when you go in there, but it's actually, you're able to join a wait list. And what ASCI needs to do is get at least 5 teams before we can go ahead with this challenge. So that is why we've asked you to join a wait list. So don't be deterred by that. Join the wait list and you're prioritized in that place on the wait list. Once we have 5, then we open it up to the whole entire ASCI member base, but you guys will definitely get priority on that. Another question from, is anyone else needing to find out any more information particular to your organisation? Please let John know. Now's a good chance to have your answers. No. All right, John. Well, look, great. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing that. It's been really insightful to hear all about the Fresh Connection and what's involved. I think it's a fantastic continued professional development event for our ASCI members, and yeah, we look forward to taking that journey with you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us today, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.